Alright, hello everybody. This is the follow along Unity tutorial. It's called Return of Zaldi. If you're here like 2 years ago, you know about the Zaldi tutorials. Otherwise, yeah. But before we begin, there's a quick announcement. Next week, we will be having a speaker come to the club. Josh Fairhurst, the CEO of Limited Run Games and the president of Mighty Rabbit Studios, will be coming to talk. He'll do a presentation and then a follow-up Q&A. So yeah, just a heads up on that. All right, so for this project, we will be using Unity, as clearly stated. Little overview of the project. We'll go through setting it up, the Unity input system, setting that up with movement, the third-person camera, an enemy follow system, sword of insta-kill, very basic stuff, and then game state. And then by the end, we'll have this combat system. All right, so yeah, setting up the project. All right, so first we'll open up Unity and go to New Project, and then we'll choose a 3D template and name it. I'll just name mine Return of Zaldi, and then sure, create it there. Create it.
And if y'all have any questions or encounter any problems, just raise your hand. Myself and Jack potentially are going to be walking around and can help with any issues y'all encounter.
That's me. We will also do, if there's any questions that may help a larger group of people, we will stop and address the question. Otherwise, we will do questions at the end and additional features if we have time. Yeah.
Do you know if we can use DirectX 12 on this or just 11?
Huh?
The graphics API, DirectX 12.
It doesn't matter.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know it doesn't matter. I was just curious if we use this later.
Not sure if the graphics API matters or if it, which ones you can use. Haven't really messed around with them before. Maybe I should have made this project beforehand.
I mean, there's an empty 3D project right there called My Project.
Oh, well it opened. Okay, so this is what you're greeted with when you open up Unity. It's a very basic thing. All you have in your assets folder is scenes with the singular map you are currently in. Alright, so the first thing we will be doing is setting up the project. We created a 3D project template. Now drop in a plane. This is a basic 3D object, which can be located when you hit the plus arrow on the plus in the top left, 3D objects, and plane. And then when you click that, it just spawns a flat plane in the world. This will be our ground. Very basic ground. So now that that's created, the next thing we need to do to set up our project is set up the input system. Now, Unity has their built-in input system, but they also have their new Unity input system, which I think is much better. So we'll go to what?
We're going to dim the lights. So
okay.
Visible. And if you know how to, Aaron, increasing the text size on the Unity thing so people at the back can see.
How do we increase the text size?
Do this at all.
Hit the button.
Just hit.
Well, there's a lot of buttons, and I've hit all of them.
Hit the one that makes the lights go.
Oh!
There you go.
Right.
There we go. We did it.
How do I enlarge the text?
I think you edit preferences and something with the way it looks.
Preferences. I haven't made any scripts. Alright.
Probably UI scale.
UI scaling.
Yeah, I think it was just Genesis.
Yeah, no. Uncheck that. Do 125 probably.
Oh boy.
So
Yeah.
just reset the project. And it should be good.
Saw that coming.
Alright.
And if that doesn't work, then screw it.
Just get a bigger screen farther away so it can project.
No, just get better eyes, you know.
Download more eyes.
Do I also need glasses? Maybe. But I just don't wear them. Alright. So, anyways, now we have our scene with our slightly bigger text and a plane in the middle. Now we will work on adding the new Unity input system. If you go to Window on the top panel, and then scroll down to Package Manager. This is where you currently have all your packages for your project. We will go to Packages in Project and change it to Unity Registry. And then from there, you scroll down to Input System and click Install. This shouldn't take long, it's very small. But yeah.
You go back there.
Yeah, which part?
I have the package manager up. So
Okay. At the top here of the package manager, it's when you open it, it'll say in project. You want to change it to Unity Registry,
okay.
and then just scroll until you see Input System. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can also search. Yes.
Have you done that?
Yeah.
Is it just like
I have a warning screen saying that if I enable the backend, doing so would restart the editor. Should I continue?
Hit yes. Yeah. You will need to restart Unity once you download it. Woo!
Let's
I
go.
love restarting Unity.
Yeah.
Man, we had a shot every time we restarted Unity today.
Yeah.
Real
We
fun. Already
workshop.
have had 3.
Yeah. This would be a real fun workshop.
That'd be a
Hey,
very fun
it's
night.
still less than you would need for Unreal.
I thought you were the one who liked Unreal.
I do. It's just a pain in the ass. Alright.
It doesn't mean he loves everything about it.
Yeah. So now you have the Unity input system installed. Next, if you haven't used Unity before, you need to set up your source editor, or what you code in. Does anyone in here not have some code editor downloaded, such as Visual Studio?
Maybe.
So what did you hope for that?
I
Alright.
don't.
So,
It should install Wiki, so you can check, but
It does.
where would I find
Unless you
where would I
like, turned it off. It
where
should.
would I
oh,
find
Just
it?
to test it.
Unity wasn't maximized. Okay. Alright, so while they do that, we're gonna want to go to Edit, and then Edit, then Preferences, down near the bottom here. Oh. Phillips, can you crouch down a bit? Sorry.
Do you need me to download this?
Alright, so if you go to Edit, then Preferences, it'll open up the Preferences menu for Unity,
Visual Studio.
and you want to go to External Tools, which is about in the middle on the left. And
Part of me feels like
over
I downloaded
here,
this at some point, but I doubt it.
alright, in External Script Editor, it'll most likely say Open by File Extension. You're going to want to click that and change it to whatever you're using. Like I'm using Visual
Hey,
Studio
Community
2022.
Professional Enterprise.
I don't know.
So yeah, and then once you switch to that, Unity may need to restart again. To be honest, I forget,
It'll be fine.
but it'll be fine.
It does.
All right,
Actually, I think Visual Studio Community has to restart, not.
yeah, it's not open.
I'm getting the sense that changing anything needs a restart.
Yeah, at least when you code, you don't need to restart.
Yeah.
But now that that's set up, you'll be able to code in Visual Studio for Unity.
Hang on.
Yeah.
What else do you need me to do?
Hmm?
Yeah, I can help
Okay.
you get it solved, don't worry.
So
Need some help too, so maybe.
now that that's set up, we're gonna wanna.
I'm already getting it installed.
Don't want that.
Yes.
I can help you guys.
All right. So
So you need Visual Studio?
next,
Okay, got it.
we got the setup of the project done. So now we're gonna do the input system.
Okay. So
Yeah, fun stuff.
okay, development with Unity.
Alright,
Is that all I need?
so you wanna create a folder.
Okay, I'll install.
So right click in the assets window and then scroll up to the top, hit create, and then if I could, folder, and then name it controls. Or whatever you wanna do to identify that that is where you put your controls.
Just name it controls.
Controls is simple. Alright, and then you're gonna wanna go back to create.
Are we in the folder?
Yes. Within the controls folder, go back to create, and at the bottom, there should be a new option because of the input system called input actions. And you're gonna wanna create that. and I'm gonna call mine input controls. Yeah. Alright. So it creates this odd looking asset here, which is your Unity input controls. On the right hand side, there's generate C# classes within the inspector. You're gonna wanna click that and click apply, and it should create a C# class for the controls. But we will not be opening that. It is just for reference when you're coding. So whenever you edit stuff in the editor, it'll go into the code and you'll be good. Now, we're gonna double click on input controls. Alright. Just to check, how many people are like caught up with what I'm doing right now? Alright, so this side of the room. At what step did I lose you guys?
When you said we needed to use Visual Studio, which we don't have.
I'd say go over how to create the input actions.
Okay.
Oh, come on.
Like how to create the.
Wait, how did you have the data
Okay.
since Sunday?
It's not that we download the data.
I know.
Alright.
Keep also, yeah, guys, as a note, if you are still waiting for Visual Studios to install, you can keep following along while it's installing. Most of it will still work. It'll just be when you get to actually writing code, it'll be a little funky.
Okay, so what? Okay,
So,
main controls.
After that, I did create, right click, then scrolled up to create, and then folder, and named it controls. And then within that folder, I right click, create, and then at the bottom, input actions. And created that, and I called it input controller.
Input action.
Yeah, at the very bottom. It should be in Unity, by default, it's not there, but once you add the new Unity input system, it will be in there.
You might have to, if your screen is not big enough to display all the options, you might have to press an arrow at the bottom to scroll down through the list.
Alright.
I think I got it now. Got the, input. Download it.
Right.
Now what about blank?
Is everyone good with the creation of the input controller asset?
I got
Raise your hand if you need individual help with that.
Alright.
That's that?
So,
I
now that we have the input controller asset made, we're gonna wanna double click,
when do you create controls?
huh?
When do you create controls asset? Yeah, the folder.
Also, should we create a script that's also called input controls within controls?
You do not create the script by right clicking and creating a script. You click on input controls, and then on the right side there's a checkbox called generate C# class, and that's what you're gonna wanna click to make the class.
Okay, so
And then apply. Yeah.
C# class file name input controls. Yeah.
Now what about creating the input control?
Alright. So, now that we have the input controller asset and the input controller script created, you're going to want to double click on the input controller asset and it'll open a new window, which is where we set up the input controls. Alright. There's several different columns on here. There's the action maps and the actions. The action map is like a broad category that you group a bunch of actions within. So like, if we do character movement, or do character controls, we'll add an action map called character, and then underneath the character, we'll add actions called movement, camera, jump, that kind of stuff. So we're gonna wanna hit the plus next to action maps and call it character. Oop, let me move that. Character controls. And so we now have an action map called character controls. And in actions, it started off a list for us. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create the movement action. So we're going to right click on the action it created, rename, and do movement. So right click, rename, and then movement. And then once that's created, you have a couple different options for every action you make. You have a button press, where it's like if you want to jump, you just press the space bar. It doesn't, like, no value is needed. It's just like, if I press this button, this happens. You have a value, which is like your mouse. When you move your mouse around, you get different directional values. and that's an example of a value or a pass-through. Not exactly sure what a pass-through does. I've never needed to use it. But for movement, we would be doing a value.
Oh, sorry, 1 second here.
Yeah.
The slides aren't showing on Twitch right now.
We're on YouTube.
Oh, then someone.
We're
Maybe they're
not
referring
streaming
to
the
the
slides right now. What's streaming is what you see behind there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone's just talking about the slides aren't showing on Twitch. That might be the art.
Jack, you want to go check that out?
I can go check it out.
All right. So now that we renamed it movement, and we're in the action properties panel on the far right hand side. Is everyone there?
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're not there, raise your hand so Phillips can come get you some help. All right.
How do you get value?
All right. So under action type, we're gonna click on it and choose value instead, and then control type button. We're gonna want to change. We're gonna want to open the drop down for that and change it to a vector 2. This is because there's 2 possible directions we can move when we put in movement. We can move forward and backwards, or with side to side. We're not moving in 3 dimensions in terms of our WASD movement. So this binding is not what we need for this, so we're going to right click and select delete, and it'll be removed. What we're going to want to do is press the plus, which is called add binding, and then add up, down, left, right composite.
I don't have that.
I also don't have that.
You don't have that?
We have add binding and add 2D vector composers.
Did you change it? Oh, it may just be a different Unity version. If you don't have up, down, left, right, use 2D vector composite. They're the same thing, just different names.
He has the
Yep.
same version as you.
I do not know. I have 1.9F. He's 3.9F.
Alright, so does everyone have something that looks like this up?
Yeah.
Alright, so we're gonna want to go through each of these and set a button related to the binding. So up, we're gonna want to go to path, and then you can click listen, and you can press a button, and it'll show up. So I press W for move forward, and
You should use any key.
what?
Any key.
Any key.
Yeah.
We're actually going to be using IJKL for this.
Oh,
Nah, you gotta get on the L comma period /
no, the ZXC.
So we chose W for move forward, and then you choose the opposite key for down. So path, listen, and then S, and I choose the S key, and then left will be the A key, and then right will be the D key.
Fun fact about the WASD, it was invented by Quake Pro players.
That makes.
So now we have the basic movement input down. Was anyone lost in that?
I'm always lost.
That's fair. Also, we will be posting a recording of this as well as the slides. I will also upload the code, everything I do here, onto a GitHub and share that as well. So yeah. So movement is done. Next, we're gonna want to do the mouse input. So when you have a person, you want to be able to move around them with the mouse. So nope, wrong. So above, on the same row as actions, you're going to hit the plus, and a new action should appear, and we'll call this camera, because this will be controlling the camera input. So camera, like movement, will be a value, and then a vector 2, because you can move the mouse in 2 different directions. Unless you have a weird mouse that registers how far away from the table it is. I don't know. 3D mouse, yeah. Yeah.
I actually did use 3D Max from
Yeah.
for personnel.
Yeah.
Can you expand movement just so people can see it?
Oh yeah, sure, sorry. There we go. Alright, so now we're gonna wanna delete the no binding again, because it's useless to us. Actually, I was wrong that time. We did want that. So, now we'll learn how to add a binding. So, we'll go to add binding,
WAS.
and it'll appear what we just deleted because I wasn't supposed to delete that. So the path is gonna, this time we can't really listen for this because this is just mouse movement. Like if you just move your mouse around, it won't listen for that. So what you're gonna wanna do is in the drop down, you're gonna wanna go to mouse and then delta. And that'll set up the input for the mouse moving around on your mouse pad. Alright.
Mouse.
Sorry, delta. Where was it just in there?
Yeah, it's in, so you go to mouse and then delta. Yeah.
I do not see that.
I do not also see that.
What do you see?
Back, forward, left button, middle button. press
Right,
button.
press
Did you change it to value in vector 2?
Let's see here.
No,
Oh, it didn't save. Wait, let's try that.
I did not.
So value and vector 2 will allow that to be.
Now
Sorry.
I've done that.
Phillips?
Yeah, both movement
There we go.
and camera should be of an action type value and should be control type vector 2.
Yeah.
That's important because you won't see the proper bindings if you don't do that.
Yeah. Alright. So then delta mouse is what we want for the camera.
I got it.
Then I'm just gonna go through all the input actions now so we don't have to reopen this later. The next thing we're gonna wanna add is the jump input. Now this is our first input that's just a button because there will be no value passed in. You just press the spacebar, you jump, you're good. So this time we will do listen again, hit the spacebar, and jump.
Hear the whole room.
Action type button, spacebar as the binding. Or tab, I guess, if you want. Alright, next we're gonna have a attack. So we're gonna wanna add another action called attack. And this can be whatever you want. It can be left click, it can be like E or something, I don't know. So if you do left click, you wanna go to mouse and then left button. And that'll be an attack. Alright. That is all the input we will need for the base presentation of this project. Alright.
Now you gotta like bind it to like multiple.
Alright. Is everyone good with the input bindings?
Hopefully.
Is attack just button? Is the
Yeah.
action type for attack just button?
Attack is just a button press. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these, when you're setting up these actions, you have the action map, which is a collection of actions you want to take. And then each of the actions like movement, camera, jump, and attack is a type of action you want to perform in the game. And you have to think, what type of data would we need for that action? For movement, you have to have a vector 2 because you want to move forward and back, left and right. Same thing for moving around the camera. But for jump and attack, you can just visualize what it's going to be like in the game, and it's just going to be a button.
You can also do controller setup through here, but we're not going to do that. I think that's just gamepad. Yeah. So, now that that's all done, you're going to want to click Save Asset. And then it'll save all your input actions and also write them to this script. As you can see, if you scroll through it, it's suddenly a lot longer, but we will not be needing to open that. That is just to reference within our own scripts. So, alright. Now we set up the movement, which is a value of vector 2. It's a value in vector 2 or vector composite. And then camera movement, we set that up as a vector 2 as well, and using delta mouse, and then equip, and then jump. We set all those up, so we're good. And next, we're gonna implement the movement.
Yeah, wait, we did attack, not equip.
Yeah, sorry. It's just what I named it when doing the slides. But attack, equip, same thing.
And we,
In this
for
case.
attack, we did left button mouse.
Yeah,
You did left button or you just did like a button?
yeah. You don't have to do the same buttons as me for any of those inputs. After that, you never reference the actual button name again. You just have to have the same value types, and that's it. So if you really wanted to, you could do movement TFGH or something. Or like mouse position, I don't know.
If you wanted to map like something to multiple buttons, there's a way to do that, I'm
guessing.
Yes. You just add another action, I believe.
You can add multiple
You
bindings
add
to the
another
same
binding.
action.
Another binding. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Gotcha.
The question was, you can add multiple bindings to one action to have like different things, such as like a controller versus keyboard. Yes, you can just add more bindings and then set them up the same way. So now we will implement movement. We're going to create a script. So we'll start actually coding for our project. We're going to use the input we just set up within that script, and then we'll do set up variables. We'll figure out what type of movement system we want to use, and then jumping, and then attaching that script to a player so that player can move throughout the world. So we're going to create a new folder. So right click, create, and then folder. I'm going to call it scripts. This is just so we can have order within our asset folder. Sometimes we're not going to create folders within folders on this, but can definitely happen when you have a lot of stuff. You can have folders within folders, just a whole folder structure. So now we're going to right click, go to create, and then C# script. I'm going to call mine player movement. All right. Once that's created, you should be able to see a preview of it on the right side. And then to open it, you're going to want to double click, and it'll open Visual Studio or whatever your preferred coding editor is.
Alright, please work.
So I make the script, what's it called?
Player movement.
In the scripts folder.
Okay, so it's not
Yes.
Player
Yeah.
Yes.
What's .NET Core SDK?
Hmm?
Is the .NET Core SDK needed?
That's like you.
The .NET Core SDK, I forget if you need it for coding. I know you need it to build the project. Jack, he's having a problem with the .NET SD Core.
General notification.
Alright.
Just give
Yeah.
Do I need that?
No. Well, it wouldn't be bad to have .NET as kind of like the generic class.
Okay. So, just to review, we created a folder, new folder called scripts, and then within that folder, we created a C# script and named it player movement. Or you can name it something different, just remember that whatever you name it is my player movement.
Apparently I have to download the latest Modo framework just to open Visual Studio.
You have to download the latest what?
Yeah, you're now along with. I'll take it.
Okay.
You're now
Modo
follow along with
framework,
him.
I think.
You're gonna swap between Unity and
Could be
Visual
because I
Why is the only option exit?
Alright.
okay, so when
So-
I open this,
Has everyone created their script and got it open now? Except for the few that people are now adjusting. Is everyone, we're good? Alright, so now the first variable I'm going to create is the is the controls variable. So earlier when I made you make a C# script from input controls, that is for reference within this. So we're going to want to create a private variable called input controls, and it should, Alright, and then input controls, and I'm gonna name this controls, and that's the end of the line. In the start function, in the start method, we're gonna do controls equals new input controls, and that creates the input controls, so we can now access them from that. So. Alright.
Can you zoom in?
Yes. There we go. Big code. It's gonna go off the screen quickly, but oh well. Alright. So we created the input controls variable and then initialized it within the start method. Alright. And since we won't be calling controls from any other or class, we made it private as well. All right.
And if you
Now-
wanted to call it to others, you'd say public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So now that we have that created, I'll tell you a bit about the new Unity input system. Previously, the old Unity input system, which I forget what version, like 2019 and before, I think, you had to do like if this key is pressed, do this in the code. So now it's a bit different. With the controls, we do controls dot, and you can see there's a lot of options, and but the one we're looking for is the name of our action mapping, character controls. So if you have multiple action mappings, when you do controls dot, it should list all the possible action mappings you have in your folder.
It does not do that for me.
Might be your code editor.
Is your IntelliSense working?
Excuse me?
I don't. Well, IntelliSense isn't set up by default to work always. It doesn't always work right away. So
Yeah.
just go ahead. If you just, if that doesn't work, just tell me to type it.
Alright.
Yeah, I had to
Oh.
try mine as well.
Yeah.
If you-
Why would you do that?
One thing I've noticed that if IntelliSense isn't working, it may be because you didn't set the default script editor within Unity. Like I've noticed that in the past. So if you go to Unity and go to Edit, then Preferences and External Tools, and change External Script Editor to Visual Studio, then that may fix your IntelliSense problems. If it doesn't, I'm not quite sure how to fix your IntelliSense problems.
I actually did not do that when you said to do that.
Yeah, just go and do that, and then restart stuff, and it should hopefully fix IntelliSense.
What about the revision control, custom tools you have in there?
You don't worry about
It
that.
still doesn't do it, but oh well.
Oh. Did you close and restart Visual Studio?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, go ahead and
Yeah.
Let me save, I suppose.
yeah, just save, close the file, and
Yeah.
reopen it through Unity.
Alright, so now that we have controls.character controls, so we have our input control class, and then the action mapping we are using within that control class. Then we're gonna want to reference the action itself, so our first one will be movement. And then you have a couple options when you choose an action. You can, the two things you will probably use the most are performed, three things: performed, canceled, and enable. So you're going to want to do performed for when you start pressing on using that input. So whenever we start pressing on WASD, whatever comes after the plus equals will be called. So in this case, we're going to want to put a method after the plus equals. So we're going to want to go down here below update and create a new method called, we'll call it movement input. But in the parentheses, there is a custom variable with the new Unity input system that we will use called a callback context. CTX, variable name. And that is required if you want to create a method that is called from a input. So as you can see, we're going to need to import, do a new using at the top. So if you hover over it, show potential fixes, and then using static Unity engine input system input action. If you don't have IntelliSense working and that doesn't appear for you, just copy this.
Wait, could you repeat your last sentence?
If you don't have IntelliSense working, and so you can't auto complete the using command, you're going to want to just type this one at the top of your script under using Unity engine. Jack.
Mine didn't have any issues with that. Like I didn't have to add like a using for that one. I just like
Really?
for callback
It can
context.
sometimes be a little finicky though, so keep
So
I'm taking a while to figure out
just-
what the heck
so
is
just
going
copy
on.
that.
Also,
Yeah.
technically, the real reason you do it is because that way it's slower for
Alright, so now,
I think restarting my thing
rather than
Oh, okay.
I think restarting my
Yeah.
thing
So
messed
it
it
makes it
up,
more specific.
because now it's like,
Lowers the chance.
hang on while I take a breather, it's taking like 2 minutes.
oh, that may sometimes happen.
I mean, that's why we like
Alright,
So I've missed like all of those.
import like specifically like Java.net. I mean, map, whatever.
so now that we have the method created with the callback context variable in the parameter, we can put movement input at the end of this line, no parentheses, semicolon. And now every time, or not yet. So now once we enable it, every time we do the movement action, it will call this method. Well, this method. Pointing at my screen doesn't help. So yeah, whenever movement is performed, movement input is called. Alright.
It's a weird use of policy.
Yeah.
It's a delegate.
It can get weirder. And it will.
Don't know C#.
So
Basically Java.
next, we're gonna want an action to be called when input is canceled. So we're gonna want to do controls, character controls dot movement. So the same beginning as the last one, but instead of performed, it will be canceled, and then plus equals,
I can't do anything with it.
and then a new new method, void stop movement, and then the callback context variable ctx. Alright. Then we're gonna want to add the stop movement at the end of the line.
Should I try to like
Yeah, if you hit tab, it will just do all that for you. That's cool.
Oh yeah. Unity IntelliSense is very nice. You don't have to add anything, unlike Unreal Engine where you have to freaking try to find a good IntelliSense thing such as Rider.
You love
I can't even
Give
explode
your
that.
message saying that the type or namespace callback context could not be found.
So
that's why
yeah.
that's why they want to use BS.
Yes, code.
Alright. So does everyone have the first performed and cancelled line set up?
No.
Is yours still open?
It's, yeah, and what sucks is that I can't close Unity or do anything with Unity. It's just stuck here indefinitely.
Can you like Control Alt Delete out?
Excuse me?
Like,
It probably can't save the thing either.
Error's coming.
I can't say, I can't do anything.
alright.
Yeah.
So
And this has been going for like 5 minutes. Yeah.
alright. Is everyone at this point with, or if you aren't being helped, are you at this point within your code? Alright.
This is so frustrating.
So, now that we have the performed and cancelled action set up, we're going to want to enable it. And do controls.characterControls.movement. So same beginning,
And I did not.
dot
I
enable.
made the key mistake of not saving
Right.
rather than
Oh.
process. It's like,
Check.
I don't see it.
Alright. And that will make it so that when we do input, it'll actually call the methods. Previously, if you don't add the enable, nothing will happen. You can set everything else up correctly, and nothing will happen if you do not enable it. So, then, okay. So, now we're gonna wanna actually code the movement stuff. So the first thing we want to do is set a move direction. So we want a private vector2, and if you remember, vector2 is what we used as the value type of movement. So vector2 we will use for the movement. So move direction, and then equals vector2.0. So we create a move direction variable and initialize it to an empty vector2. Alright. Then the next thing we want to do is create a speed variable. So speed will be a float and just name speed. And we can initialize it to something like 5f, because it's a float. If you aren't familiar with coding, a float is just a number with decimal places, basically.
I thought that was a double.
Float is like a bigger double.
No,
Well-
double's a big float.
Seriously?
Yes,
I always get that confused.
Double is short for double precision float.
Double is a bigger float. But, so, we won't need anything that a float cannot do, so we're just using a float. Yep. No. I definitely said that the first time. And there's no recording to prove
You know, like the string.
Yeah. So, we have a move direction and a speed. Then, we're going to go down to movement input and do move direction equals. And now we're going to want to read the value of whatever buttons we are pressing from the callback context variable. So when we press W, it'll pass in a vector 2 where the x value is 1. If we press W and D, it'll have a vector where the x and y value are 1, and so on and so forth. So W and S, sorry, I messed that up. W and S control the y value of the vector 2, and A and D control the x value of the vector. So we're going to want to do CTX as the callback context variable, and then dot read value. And then, as you can see, it's trying to autocomplete for me, but I'm going to type it myself. So, yeah, you're going to want to do the little arrow thingies. I know there's a name, but I forget what it is called. Yeah. So then you're going to want to say vector2 because that is the variable type we want, and then parentheses. And so now whatever buttons we are pressing will be read into the move direction variable. All right. Then for stop movement, when we are no longer pressing any buttons, we want the move direction to be a vector 0. So both the x and y value have a 0 in that position. So we're going to want to do move direction equals vector2.0. And so now, once we stop movement, it'll set the move direction to be 0. So it will not move anymore. Now, setting up the move direction variable does not actually move the player. What we're going to want to do is go into the update method, though we're going to change it to be a fixed update method so that it is called by a certain amount of time every time. So now, in fixed update, we're going to actually set up the movement for the player. Right. On the slides, I mentioned rigid body versus transform movement. This is because there's basically two ways to do movement in Unity. Well, three, there's probably a third, but that's a weird way to do it. I guess you can add a force, but that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, so there's either using a rigid body or the transform. The method using transform is just, so if you do transform.position, you can do plus equals, and then each fixed update, it'll move the player a little bit in a certain direction. Like it'll just move them. Or there is there's a component called a rigid body within Unity. Rigid bodies control gravity, and for the player, they give gravity to the player. They simulate physics. It's a very helpful thing. It also has a velocity variable. So we're going to want to do a private rigid body RB at the top. And then within the start function, we're going to want to initialize that to RB equals get component rigid body.
Close that character.
Get component returns a component attached to the same to the same game object as the script of type rigid body. So once we attach this to a script, we will also need to add a attach the script to a game object. We will also need to add a rigid body component, otherwise this value will be null. So now that we have a rigid body, you can do RB dot and see that there's a velocity value. So the two methods for movement are using velocity or transform.position. Velocity is generally the better way to do movement within Unity. So we're gonna use velocity within this workshop. Yeah.
Can you please slow down? I'm so sorry.
Oh no, you're fine.
I'm just got so far behind.
Was everyone able to follow through the rigid body thing and the move direction setup? Alright. Should have brought my water bottle in. Yeah.
You need I report anything from the root design.
No. It should be imported with the using Unity engine.
Okay, so let me see here. So
Alright.
wait, void fixed update. Where's this void update?
What is the
Fixed update. Okay, so RB.
create class?
No, I
where's the
so
import
much
statement
to go through.
Huh?
Where's the import statement for rigid?
There is none.
I don't want a render buffer.
Rigid
B
body?
is lowercase. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is no import statement for rigid body. It should be included with using Unity engine.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm pressing an RB, it's not
Rigid
let
body.
me just do RB and
Hmm?
just automatically.
I have to
switch
be
to
in
render
body.
buffer.
Capitalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
R is the only letter that's capitalized within rigid body.
Yeah, I do it whenever it makes sense. It's really finicky like
Alright.
that, right?
So then in fixed update, we're going to want to set the velocity of the player. So we do this by doing RB.velocity equals. Velocity is a, First, we're going to want to create a vector 3 because the velocity variable is a 3D vector, which means it goes in all three directions rather than our current move direction only goes in two. So we're going to create a vector 3 and I'll call it just velocity. And then we'll set that equal to a new vector 3. And then in the x value, we'll put move direction dot x. In the y value, we're not going to put move direction dot y because in Unity, they use the axes with the y value being the vertical axis. So x and z are the horizontal axes within Unity, which is different than Unreal Engine and Blender if you're used to either of those. So in the y value, we're going to want to do rb.velocity.y so that we keep the velocity of the player if they're like falling or anything like that. And then we're going to want to put move direction.y and the z value. Yeah.
Could you rewind for a bit to when you started running in fixed update?
Yeah, so we're going to want to create a vector 3 variable called velocity and then initialize it to a new vector 3 with move direction dot x as the x value, the y value of rb.velocity in the y value, and move direction dot y in the z value. That will keep the y velocity of the player while changing the x and the x and the z velocities to account for movement. Alright.
Okay.
Then, currently, actually first, what? Okay. First, we're going to want to normalize the move direction variable. This is because currently, if we're pressing the W and D keys, 1 is in both the X and Y, which means you will move faster if you're moving diagonally than if you're just moving in a straight direction. So we're going to want to normalize it so you're always moving at the same speed. So we're going to do move direction dot norm. Well, we're going to do move direction equals move direction dot normalized, and then we're going to multiply it times the speed that we want to move at. So now that will normalize it so we move in the same speed. I mean, we don't speed up when moving diagonally, and then we will also incorporate the speed value. And the reason we multiply it to move direction rather than velocity is because then you would be multiplying speed times the y value of velocity, which you do not want to do. Huh? You would speed up falling for no reason.
Could you explain what normalized actually means?
Oh yeah, normalized is like if it takes like the
It makes
the magnitude.
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
the length equal to 1. So it basically
Yeah.
makes it where no matter what direction it's pointing in, no matter what numbers are in your vector, the length will come out to be 1, but it maintains the proportion between the different elements.
If YouTube stream didn't hear that, it'll make sure the magnitude of the vector is always 1, but it'll keep the same proportions that it had previously as a summary. Okay. Yeah.
Turn the vector into a direction.
Yep. So now rb.velocity we set to move direction. Oh no, velocity. Sorry, my bad. We set it to velocity. Alright. Now we have the basic movement sort of set up. Now we will attach this script to a player to see if it works. And it most likely will not, because that's how it goes. So, alright, we're going to want to go to plus. Oh, yeah. We're going to want to go to plus, and then 3D object and capsule, which will spawn a capsule within the world. It may spawn in a weird place. So you want to go to the transform in the top right and set the position to 0, 0, and then like 3, actually 2. So the new position is 0, 2, 0. That'll make it float above the plane so that it'll actually be in the right position. Right. Do people have the capsule within the world? Yeah.
What'd you say?
What? Alright, so I went to the plus over here on the left.
What is the RB velocity?
Create 3D object and then capsule. And then after that, I changed the position in the transform to 0, 2, 0.
What's on the path?
Alright.
Well, I have to. It's not saying
Alright.
input controls.
Alright. Does anyone need me to reopen the code real quick?
You might want to do that.
Alright.
Just so people can see it for a little bit.
Alright.
Okay,
So, if you weren't able to get it all, here is the code currently.
Oh, first of all,
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
this needs to be input system.
Alright. Hey, Jack, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you get my water bottle from my backpack?
Hang on. So, is it in there?
It's behind the whiteboard. In there. The one near the staff desks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there code you need to double on the screen?
Alright.
Okay, hang on. So we crap. Can you move down a little bit?
Alright. How are people feeling about the code so far?
Not good. I'm still trying to catch up. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So some things I bought, you should not be capitalized.
We're probably not going to cover everything.
It's the timing is becoming very much a.
I feel like I should have realized after I said AI when I was like,
What? Hang on.
Why would you try to add AI?
no, it's very simple though.
Like you're just like creating an app mesh.
Yeah.
Like still, no.
It's very simple AI.
Don't.
It just follows the player.
Just don't do it.
But what if I could?
No.
You're right. The camera movement will most likely take up most of the rest of the time.
Oh, that's your problem.
So, I am going to go back to Unity. And now we have the capsule component within the world floating above the plane. Now, if you press start, you'll notice
That one.
nothing happens. Yeah. So, the first thing we're gonna want to do is add component rigid body. Yeah. Yeah.
I
So-
remember it says that type of namespace rigid body cannot be found.
Did you capitalize anything other than the R?
Because, okay, wait.
Not, oh, never mind. Yeah, I did.
Alright. Now that we have the rigid body, we're gonna freeze the rotation of the X, Y, and Z so that it doesn't just hit stuff and start rotating randomly around the world. Yeah. Oh, by the way, adding rigid body. I went to add component and then typed in rigid body in the search bar. And then added it through there.
Okay. I don't understand.
Constraints, freeze. I think you should be able to follow it.
Yeah,
You should be able to follow it.
No. So now if you run the game, you'll notice the guy falls and hits the ground. So fancy, you know? So, now that we have the rigid body, we can add the script. One way you can do this is go to add component and search your script name, player movement, or you can grab it from your assets panel and drag it into the game object. And it'll be added there. Yeah. Wait, sorry, what?
You just added the capsule, like after you finished writing the script?
Yeah, I just added the capsule, then added a rigid body to that capsule.
Okay.
Homeboy falls way slower now though.
Yeah. Hmm?
I did that, but he falls slower now.
Yeah, okay, so, alright, I did all that, so now.
Make sure you save it again.
Player movement. Crap. Okay.
Yeah, save every time you change
Yeah,
something,
okay.
pretty much.
He's just,
Okay, so I say,
he's just kind
so,
of, he's just kind of.
okay, hold on
look
here
at
a
me,
minute.
look at me go.
Look at me,
So,
so
I need to create a capsule.
Oh, and he fell off.
Wait,
why is yours?
Alright.
Oh, yeah, he. Mine just fell off the world if I,
Alright. So, did people add the player movement component and the rigid body to the capsule? Alright.
I did.
Now, when you start the game, the capsule should fall back to the ground, and then when you press WASD, it should move around.
It's saying there is no rigid body attached to the capsule game object, but it's
Is that it?
Then you need to go to add component and add a rigid body if it says there's no rigid body component. If your character is falling slowly, it's most likely because when you calculated velocity, you did not do rb.velocity.r.
I didn't see that part.
Yeah. That happened to me earlier today.
That's why.
Well, unfortunately, I know
Yeah.
none of this code.
So, if your character is falling oddly slow, make sure you have this part in right here, rather than just 0.
Figured if it was like I didn't know it was weird.
Alright, so now we have a character. Actually, let me adjust the camera real quick. So I'm gonna click the camera, drag it up, drag it over, and just point it down. So that we can see the character moving around better. Now you can see the movement is kind of weird right now. It just moves around.
Did I miss something to like get your moves working?
So now we have basic character movement within the game. Alright. Does anyone not have the basic character movement
That's funny.
and not being helped currently? Yeah. What points did I lose you guys at?
Or I have a component.
Oh wait. Sorry. What? Yeah.
I did everything. I had to do something. I follow along pretty well.
Alright. Jack back there. Alright. What's up with yours?
I mean, it's just not like it's simply
Did you add the player movement script?
yeah.
No, it's fine.
Hello world.
Ah,
How are you doing?
If,
If I'm gonna miss something in
Oh,
the
add component. Add component.
does your code look like this?
Oh wait, no. Add component, player movement, add the script.
Switch it up here.
Player movement.
I forgot the name. So it's just a new name.
Then type in new behaviors.
Oh, one quick thing. In
And it
code,
should work. Should.
as you can see, our speed variable,
And press.
we will most likely want to edit variables such as speed from the editor,
A semicolon.
but we don't want to access speed from other classes. So what we can do is serialize the field.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah. So currently it's a private variable, which means it won't be able to be called from any other class. What we're going to want to do is add a line above speed, or just type at the beginning of the line, and type bracket serialize field. And if you save, now the speed variable is accessible from the editor. So now if you click on the capsule, speed is now listed here. And you can edit it through there. Yeah. Alright.
Yes.
How are people feeling about movement?
As well as I can.
I'm ready to jump.
Yeah. Alright.
So okay, time out. So is all of this kind of the very basic stuff like
Yeah.
No, I am
because
adamant.
he was telling me like he would that's when he started he was copying all of it.
Oh yeah. Once you do it once, you can kind of move this between your projects. Yeah.
Can you quickly go to your projects and then your controls folder?
My what?
Your controls folder?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
And open controls, I'm guessing?
No, I'm just curious if they need to be specific.
Oh, okay. Alright. So, now that we have some basic movement, I'm gonna add a jump function, which is something very simple. Jumping is much simpler than movement because it's just a button press. So what we're going to want to do is very similar to what we see here. So we're going to want to do controls.character controls.jump.performed. And then we're going to want to create a method. Oh wait, let me keep that on there for a second. We're going to want to create a method called void jump callback context. Yeah. Alright. Which we will call from the performed. Alright. So right there, I did the same thing as above with the performed, but I changed movement to jump, and then created a new method called jump, from which to call jump.performed. Alright. This, we will not be doing a canceled action. If you want to, you can have jump be on canceled rather than performed, but for this, I will be using performed. And canceled, we will not touch. You do not need to use both of them, unless you are doing some fancy mechanics where you hold jump and do something. So, then we'll just enable the jump. So now the jump is enabled. Now we need to set up how the jump itself functions. Alright. So we're going to want to go up here and add a new variable called private float jump force. and I'm gonna set that to like 100.
Out of curiosity, what unit is that in?
Float 100.
No, like is it like 100 like newtons if Unity runs in centimeters?
I forget what unit. It's just 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I'll figure it out.
and then I'm going to serialize this field as well because I'm going to want to tweak it within the editor. So I did serialize field and then private float jump force equals 100. Now that I have the jump force variable, I'm going to want to go into the jump method and use it. So this we will use the rigid body for as well. So what we're going to want to do is RB add force. And then we do a new vector 3 and then 0 and then jump force 0. That way it'll jump straight up in the air whenever you press jump. So if we go to Unity and run this, you should notice it looks a little weird when you do it. Because currently you can keep on jumping into infinity. Like, you can just fly by spamming the spacebar. So what we want to do is check if the player is grounded, so touching the floor below them. What we're gonna need for this is a collider. So we're gonna want to do private collider, and then just name it like player collider. And then like the rigid body, we're gonna want to go down here and do player collider, and then equals get component collider. And I mean just add a space there. So now we have the player collision component, which in this case is a capsule collider. It's just the outline of the shape. Then what we're gonna want is the distance to the ground. So we're gonna want to create a float called dist to ground and leave that uninitialized at first. And then down here, we'll set that in the start method. So we'll do dist to ground equals, we're gonna want to use the player collider dot bounds, which is just the reach of the collider, extents, which is half the height of the object, and then dot y. So the extents gives you like half of the capsule collider basically, and then dot y gives you half the height. So this sets the distance to the ground to be half the height of the capsule. So that since the transform is based in the center of the object, this is the distance to the ground. So now distance to ground is set, and we can check if the object is grounded. And that will be a method we create. This one will actually return a value called bool. It's just a true or false variable, and then is grounded with no parameters.
It's just called bool in C++, not bool in C.
It's just called bool in C#, yeah.
Okay, well, a little confusing by me, but you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah. So now,
Bool is good. What?
yeah. Now we're gonna want to do
Could be longer.
something that's a little more complicated. We're gonna want to do a raycast.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, no, you've got to do it to see if it's grounded. Yeah. Now let me see if I can do this correctly. All right, you're gonna want to return physics.raycast. You don't need to what?
If you really wanted, you could just, if there's a collision, it's grounded, and just ignore sides for now. But
Nah.
This is a lot better.
This is the better way to do
This
it.
is the real way to do it.
Yeah. if you just checked for collisions, you could stick to a wall, and then you could jump up the wall. Yeah. So we're gonna return physics.raycast, and then we're gonna do how do we do this?
Gotta pull up the Unity API.
Huh?
So it needs vector 3 origin, vector 3 direction, flow max distance, int layer max.
All right.
It needs like a lot of crud.
Yeah. All right. Shit. I'm trying to remember how to do this. Oop. I can't say that on YouTube, can I? All right. So we're gonna. All right.
You are our teacher. We do not care.
All right. I think it's like.
It's the start position, then it's the direction, then it's the total distance, then it's the layer mask.
Okay.
Yeah, it's origin, direction, mask. With
Transform dot position. All right. Transform dot position, and then we're gonna do. The first variable is transform dot position.
Awesome.
And then we're comma negative vector 3 dot up. So this is just the down vector, basically. And then max distance. This is where we use the distance to ground variable. So we're gonna do distance to ground plus 0.01 f. Just so we go a bit beyond the bottom of the player to see if we're colliding with anything.
The default layer mask should work. I don't think you need to
Yeah.
change it.
And then you end it. And this will return true if the player is currently sitting on the ground, or return false if they are up in the air. Jack, back there.
Yep. Well, I'm wondering could you just scroll up maybe?
To what?
I'm missing some stuff.
Okay, let's see. No, go back to your code.
Jack.
Let's see what it's saying.
Elliot, you able to follow along good?
I'm still able to match.
I've gone on a completely different direction at this point.
No way.
I know. What?
I'm commenting code.
Whoa. Hey, if you want to get fancy, in my sample project, I did required component. Alright. So, now that we have, are we good up here, or can I scroll?
No.
Huh? 2022.
I have a blue one.
What?
That would be VS Code. It is a different application entirely.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get IntelliSense working with VS Code. So
I love VS Code. It always works perfectly.
That's
Alright.
I've been trying
So,
for the past hour to get this to work.
Now we're gonna want to go back to the jump function to use the is grounded method. So we're gonna want to do if is grounded,
Oh, board jump.
and then just indent that one line. And now, only if the player is sitting on the ground will they be able to jump. Sorry.
That's stupid. One-line if statement.
Alright.
Hang on. Is grounded. Yeah,
So
that's it.
if is grounded, then jump. So now you can't jump into infinity,
I indented it, so should it?
and you can only jump if you're on the ground.
That's kind of a lame jump. Can I make my jump force higher?
Yes.
Higher?
Do a million.
You can go to, if you want to make your jump force higher, you can go to capsule, and then if
Because I
you,
serialize my field.
yeah, if you serialize your field, then you can change it. Let's make it 300.
Ah, shoot. I missed
And
it.
then when we jump, they will jump much higher.
Oh. Crap,
And now we have a jump and movement function.
Oh yeah, 10,000 is a pretty good value.
Technically, you can still move while jumping, but we're not covering that today. Yeah.
Could you just go back for a second?
Yeah.
10,000 was a bit silly. I think 1,000.
Which part?
Mine doesn't
Yeah, just 100.
Alright. Do people have the jump function down?
But you know, real question, when you serialize a field, how do you get it to update in the editor?
Oh, 1,000 is too much.
You don't.
Okay. So like when I changed jump force in the code, it didn't update in the editor.
Yeah.
So don't change it in the code, change it in the editor.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
But it'll update if you make add it to a new object.
500.
So yeah. Now we have the jump function down.
How far are you?
And
But it's going down.
technically the next thing I had planned was camera rotation. I don't know if I can do that in the time left.
Yeah, go ahead and just
I'm gonna try. We'll see. What I will not be doing is the camera adjusting to anything behind you, because that takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I have it, but yeah. So
Now, if you really want to get crazy, make it so that anything between the camera and the player becomes transparent.
no.
That is a pain in the ass.
So we're gonna want to create a new script.
I've done it.
Create a new C# script called camera movement.
In where?
In the scripts folder. In the scripts folder, create a new C# script called camera movement.
Sorry, but my computer just my computer ran into a problem. It needs to restart.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
with that, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now we open the new script.
Wait, what's it called?
Camera movement. Alright. Now, so the first thing we're gonna want to do is a reference to the player object, well, the player transform, because we're gonna want to be able to find the player in the world and move the camera relative to the player. So we're gonna have a private transform player, and then we're gonna serialize that field. If you don't want to serialize, you can also make it public. But I am serializing.
Because that way, like when you actually play the game, it won't be public.
It is good practice, so I'm serializing. So,
Scripts. Okay, so that's gonna be there.
alright. Now I'm gonna set up a couple more variables for the camera. One, we're gonna want the private float of camera rotation speed,
Favorite solution to this. There are better solutions. But
and I'm gonna set that to 100. You can also serialize this field. You can serialize most of these fields, but I'm not going to for this, just for go faster through them. Then we're gonna want a private float X rotation, private float Y rotation, and then I'm gonna add these. I'm not sure if I'll get to them, but I'm gonna add them. Private float Y main value, and equal that to about -20, and then private float Y max value, and set that to 120. I think.
Let's check my. Oh, that's so good.
Alright, so now we have those variables set up. Alright. Oh, then we're gonna want a variable for the distance from the player. And I'll set that to 5 units. I think it's meters, but
I
yeah.
would assume meters.
Yeah. So 5.
Oh, I spelled transform wrong.
Now, oh. Now I just have to remember how to do this because this is a bit of code. Oh, sorry. We're gonna want another input controller variable in this. I mean, yeah, input controls variable.
Bro, I'm so glad. That's why I did one private float on a
So, now we set up the new controls equals new input controls. Then we're gonna want to use the camera movement action. So controls dot character controls dot camera, and then dot performed. All right. Then we're gonna have a method for the camera movement. I'm gonna call it rotate camera, and then call back context CTX. And you're gonna need to import it once again into this script. And then I'm gonna call rotate camera. Okay.
Do we change the update to that?
Hmm?
Like,
Oh, I didn't mean to delete update.
I was about to say.
Void. I'm gonna make it fixed update.
Or you can probably do update for this one.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Alright. So now we have the rotate camera call. Then we're gonna need a stop rotate camera call. Cancelled instead of performed. And we're gonna need another method called void. I'm gonna call it stop rotate camera.
Good call.
Call back context CTX. And then stop rotate camera. Then we just enable. Now we have the input set up so that we can actually start working on the rotate camera functionality. Oh, then one more variable we will need is another vector2, and then rotate direction equals vector2 dot 0. So I hear a lot of typing, so I'm going to pause for a minute.
Yeah, it was a little fast.
My bad.
We're not expert coders yet.
You will be.
Is there anything in the stop rotating camera yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Now I'm installing.
Plus, it's been a while since I have done some serious coding.
Alright. So with the coding dimmed down a bit, I'm going to begin working on the rotate camera method. So in the rotate camera method, I'm going to want to get the direction of movement from this CTX object. So rotate direction equals CTX dot read value vector 2, just like we did for the movement action before. Then in stop rotate camera, we're going to want to set rotate direction to be 0. Alright. Now,
For whatever reason, I use the callback for context, it just says.
the next thing.
Can you scroll back down?
Oh yeah, sorry.
What's it?
The next thing we're gonna want to do is set the x rod and y rod, which variables I made above, in the start function. So x rod I'm gonna set to the transform.Euler angles. Euler.
No.
I don't care. I call it Euler.
You're calling it wrong.
I'll call it what I like.
I know what you do.
Euler.
Did I show you the
Yes.
Variance project?
Alright. So transform.Euler angles dot
In CSS.
x.
Go all the way to the top.
And then y rod will be transform.Euler angles dot y.
Input system.
Just probably
Okay.
compact.
Euler.
Euler.
Euler, dude. That's just
It
not
is early.
That's just not his name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he's. Oh, was he German adjacent? Excuse me.
He
Jack.
was a German descendant.
Alright.
Yeah.
So now we'll get to the kind of complicated part. To be honest, it's a little complicated. So
I'm getting a weird error.
what error are you getting?
It's just a lot of stuff scribbled.
Huh?
Oh, callback context comes around. What's the important statement for callback context?
This.
It's just using standard.
It's because you can dodge it.
Not in the system, not in the actual.
Yeah.
You can also just copy it from your other script.
Yeah. I both ways.
Alright, so in the fixed update, we're gonna want to do a few things. X rot. We're gonna do plus equals rotate direction dot x.
Is that good? Semicolon? We're good? We're good.
Alright. Times
I don't think I've defined it. Yeah, that's
so I'm just trying to remember. Oh, camera rot speed times time dot delta time. We do the time dot delta time so that it is not frame rate dependent and moves all crazy. Otherwise it will move crazy.
okay, hang on. So,
I hate it when it's crazy.
Yeah.
We got same shit with the Y one.
Yeah. Y rot, except you do minus equals rotate direction dot y times camera rot speed times time dot delta time.
Care to elaborate on minus equals?
Huh?
Care to elaborate on why it's minus?
Because when I did plus equals, it went the wrong direction. So I made it minus.
Okay, by wrong direction, do you mean if I made it plus, it would be inverted state controls?
Yes.
Probably because the camera's above the player,
Yeah.
so you want to,
If you want
go down towards it instead of going up
yeah, that would
against
just be
it.
preference. Gotcha.
Alright, so we got those two variables set. Now, I must remember what we do next.
what you mean? Like movement and
Action canceled.
Yeah, do we have stuff?
Canceled.
Yeah, I did cancel. Rotation direction equals vector 2.0. So, yeah.
Transform dot rotate, and you use quaternion dot Euler.
yeah, simple,
Oh.
simpler code.
Euler.
Oh, what?
You forgot the name.
Right.
I did forget the name.
Oh wait, no. Sorry, it's a bit different since we're rotating around the player.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, next. If I think, okay, we are now using quaternion rotation.
I love quaternions.
No, quaternions are bad and evil, and I don't like them.
I wrote a 3,000 word paper on them. I hate them.
That's a bit much, but.
When? How?
Alright. Huh?
Are you familiar with the IV program?
Bro.
So then quaternion dot Euler angles. And then
My extended essay was on
we're gonna want to do a new vector 3, and then if I remember correctly, we switched.
1996 congressional hearings on video game violence.
This one we're gonna switch the Y rod and the X rod. I did it wrong, didn't I?
Euler angles is deprecated.
Yeah, when you define
They're deprecating everything but leave it in the code. Remove it from the code if it's
Just
deprecated.
delete the word angles. Yeah.
Okay, so now we have quaternion rotation equals quaternion dot Euler, new vector 3, Y rod, X rod 0. I may go back on that later. We'll see.
I gotta be on it somehow.
But anyways,
Anyway, can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah, you can do that if you want. Okay, it's my own issue. I have to figure it out.
oh wait, before we do that, we're gonna want to clamp the Y rotation so that you can't rotate around the entire player. Like you can't be under its feet looking at it, you know? So I'm gonna create a method called float
There we go.
clamp angle. And then we're gonna want to take the Y float Y rotation. Well, float Y rotation. So it doesn't get confused. So now, if the Y rotation we pass in is less than negative 360, we add 360 degrees.
Did you make Y rotation?
Oh yeah, I just changed. I just made the parameter passed in Y rotation so it doesn't get confused with Y
No way
rot.
this function doesn't already exist.
It does.
There's clamp angle. Is there clamp rotation?
I typed in clamp and then went to type in return and it autofilled the entire clamp function for me.
Oh, well.
I was like, there's no way we're doing this right now.
What is the correct name for it though?
Also, yeah, what's up with your red squiggle?
Yeah, I have a red squiggle.
Huh? Oh, I haven't returned anything.
You fools.
You want me to return 0?
Yes.
Alright. Well, I'm just gonna continue with what I was doing. Even though clamp quaternion exists.
Yay, quaternion.
Yeah. So if Y rotation is greater than 360, I typed yo rotation.
Yo.
Then Y rotation minus equals 360. And then return math f dot clamp. So it'll clamp the value, and then the first value you pass in is the value you want to clamp, and then you pass in the min, which is what we made from earlier, Y min value, and then Y max value.
What is this
Yeah.
function?
So is your goal just to stop the numbers from getting really big, or to stop it from rotating too far? 'Cause right now that's a full rotation, in either direction.
No, it's not.
We mean Lucy.
Just watch. just watch.
Okay.
This worked earlier, so I hope it works again unless I did something wrong. I could also be doing it in a very weird way, and probably am, but this is how I did it earlier. So Y rot equals clamp angle, and then pass in Y rot.
This goes into the
Hmm?
Yeah, it goes.
Oh, it's 'cause you're clamping after. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So now we will need to get the distance. Well, the what's it called? Okay. Oh yeah, we do vector 3 negative distance. Well, I'll just type neg distance equals new vector 3 0 0 negative distance. Alright, now with that variable, we will get the position of the camera. Vector 3 position equals rotation times negative distance plus player dot position.
It's a 40 vector. You know, like a. Yeah.
Alright. Now with those variables, I believe we are ready to set the position and the rotation of the camera. So we can do transform dot position equals position, and transform dot rotation equals rotation.
We might be something.
Don't worry, I'm running all the shortcuts at this point.
Alright.
I always forget to just hit tab.
You just keep hitting tab. Every time he says vector 3, I'm like, v3, go. And it just does it. I'm like,
Oh, you can just like put it in B3.
yeah, you literally just, v3 tab.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, okay.
Ain't no way I've been using this thing for 30 minutes.
Cool.
It's the first thing I tried to do when I was like, I can't type this fast.
Alright. So
I can.
we have that set up, and now
I'm rusty though.
it'll hopefully work.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back to the Unity editor.
We were coding a video game on that.
I'm gonna go to main camera.
And wait for it to load all our scripts in, because we just did a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
This is a faster laptop.
Alright, go.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Could you, my computer finally restarted. Could you, go back to the script? So I can
You should
turn on the mouse.
actually use the camera.
Yes. Is it possible to take a picture so I can?
Yes, it is possible I can take a picture.
All right. Let me zoom out so you can take a picture of everything.
Oh, yeah, it didn't work yet. So now we have to go.
We have to add a script to it.
Camera objects, we have to go. Camera.
Ah. I'm
take a picture of it?
yeah. Sure.
Now I hit.
Everyone is welcome to take a picture if they'd like.
And Don't be worried about missing out on some of the code because we are going to upload the whole project after this.
Yeah,
You can
we're gonna-
download it and you can pirate all the code.
Yeah, the project will be on GitHub,
It's
and
not pirating if you want us to do it.
Well, steal it. You can steal it. You have permission to steal it.
alright. So it will be on GitHub, and also the YouTube video will be up as well. Now, since we have that, we go to main camera,
Yeah.
and then we will take the camera movement script and drag it over to the game object.
Yes.
Alright. And now you'll notice that the player variable is listed underneath the script. If it's not listed, make sure that the variable is either public in your code or you serialize the field.
I'm pretty sure it's
What does serialize mean?
it puts it in.
It makes it visible to the editor, but not
Oh, yeah,
other
that's
classes.
right. That's-
Yeah.
You explained that, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So now that we have this in, if we try to run it, we will get errors because we did not set the player value. So what we're going to want to do is grab the player object on the left-hand side and drag it into the transform here.
What do we want? Oh, capsule.
Yeah. We're going to want to grab capsule and drag it into the player value variable on the right-hand side.
I am
I don't have a
very,
question.
my computer is very slow.
My camera is in the floor.
Aaron,
Well, you can just
why is this so slow?
Yeah.
Look at this.
Alright.
My camera's in the
So
floor.
now, if we run it, it should hopefully work correctly.
Yeah, yours is also like kind of like lagging behind. Why is it doing that?
Hey, mine's just wrong. Give me a second.
Oh.
Oh, mine got stuck in the floor as well.
Alright.
Oh, there it goes.
Clamp angle.
I think it's just because once you
Show me your code.
Yeah.
Why?
It's the one that's in the
What?
Funky.
Huh?
It's
Let me
not,
see.
it's not sensitive.
No, it's like something somewhere is there's wrong happening.
It turns out wrong. It's like that.
Alright. Alright. One thing I will do is disable the cursor. Cursor dot lock state equals lock cursor cursor lock mode dot locked
Where does this go?
in the start method within camera movement. So this will keep your cursor in one position, and then we're gonna set it to be not visible. So cursor dot visible equals false.
What did I do wrong?
Where did you go wrong?
Where did I screw up?
Yeah.
I know it's clamp angle. That's got me.
Here, I can show you to you in a second.
Yeah. Alright.
Yeah,
So-
found it. I put min value twice instead of min value max value, so it was just min value. The only value.
Oh, I set the max Y to be too high. Instead of 120, I think it's supposed to be 90.
90?
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Oh, is that our field of view?
No,
it's
how
the
high the camera
yeah.
can rotate.
So change Y max value to 90. Otherwise, you can go over the player.
But it is kind of funny.
All right. So now I will switch back to the Unity thing, and then
But my cursor is still viewable for some reason.
Mine's just built,
all right.
My cursor is still
It
visible.
is
You know,
for some reason very janky.
hit the escape button if you want or come back.
Well, no, mine's always visible, and I haven't set them off.
Hey,
Wait.
Aaron.
Yeah.
And I know this is kind of how we covered it. The input directions are absolute nonsense.
What?
So like when I turn my camera and I press forward, it still moves towards
I know.
graphic normal. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we about to do something about that, or are we about to go to Golden Dragons?
We're about to run out of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understandable. Have a nice day.
So I'm gonna. This may fix it. This may not. I'm seeing real quick before announcing anything.
Mine My camera, I mean, my cursor is.
Oh yeah, that's much better.
What do you do?
Alright, changed fix update to late update, and it should be a much smoother rotation.
Yeah, I was about to say, my computer is not this slow.
Give me a 3-second explanation as to why that works.
Because it does.
Alright, give me a 10-second explanation.
Huh? I think fixed update because it's more choppy, while late is what?
The reason is because late update makes it calculate at the very end of the frame, so if your movement is still occurring partially through the frame, fixed update may run at just
Twice.
during the frame, so half your movement happens after it's already cut off and calculated.
Oh, so it literally skips.
Yeah, so the part of the movement's getting cut off, so if you put input, you put the camera movement into the end of the frame, then it's grabbing the whole thing instead of skipping little bits of it.
Thank you, Jack.
That's what I said.
That's why.
That shows
Yeah.
what you said.
That's why
Yeah.
my wife said a lot.
So, well, I figured it out, so I get points for that. So, change fixed update to late update, and it should remove much of the choppiness. One thing you will notice, though, is that you're not moving relative to the direction you're facing.
And how much code is that?
It's more than 5 minutes of code.
Cursor?
We have 5 minutes left before. Yeah, I can just do it quickly if we want.
Just have no talk.
Worst case, you can always make a short part 2 clip to add to the YouTube page.
Alright, so fixed update.
What are you adding?
Huh?
What are you adding?
To move in the direction you're facing.
Have fun.
Alright, so real quick, what we're gonna want to do. We're gonna want to do a new variable, private transform. I can type transform, camera transform. Then we're gonna want to set camera transform to camera transform equals camera, capitalized like cursor, main dot transform. Alright, then in the fixed update component, what we're gonna want to do is we're gonna want to do transform dot Euler angles equals new vector 3. Then transform dot Euler angles dot x, comma camera transform dot Euler angles dot y, and then transform dot Euler angles.
Oh, wait, is this
This is in player movement.
Yeah, this is in player movement. Sorry. Dot z.
Okay.
So this will make the player face in the same direction as the camera.
Player.
Then
Wait, where is this?
this is in player movement fixed update.
Oh, this is in player movement.
Oh,
Yeah.
that caught a lot of
check
us.
this all up.
So then what we're gonna want to do is do a float x val and wait no. Alright. What we're gonna do is a set that to 0 and that to 0. Then we're gonna do velocity plus equals move transform dot forward times move direction dot y. And this will make it so that when you move forward, you move forward. Or when you press W, you will move forward. And then velocity plus equals transform dot right times move direction dot x. So yeah, that should in theory work. I will leave this up for a second.
Hold on.
I'm actually going kind of fast. I'm a little bit shocked. I'm not.
Is that a wave or a question?
Yeah, question.
Yes.
Hello, Jack.
You can
I know I
also
waited
take a
for
picture
yours,
real
but,
quick if you think you're gonna lose this in a second.
My
Hang on.
issue
I'm almost
right
done.
now is I believe everything works, but
Hey, wait, what is your velocity only
my
have 0 RV
my
velocity?
cursor is still visible. Even though I have
Because we
visible
set
false.
the velocity to only be the rigid body velocity of y initially, and then add on the x and y x and z values through the transform dot forward and transform dot
Why
right.
can't we just put those in the thing?
Because transform dot forward is a vector. Transform dot
Because it has multiple values.
yeah. Transform dot forward will edit the x and z components.
So you just change this to 0 now.
Window that's like
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright,
Because what happens?
I'm gonna make sure this works.
You know, if you escape,
No.
it's not there. Because
Well, first, I'm gonna add a little thing to the player.
Okay.
So it's really weird. If you
I'm gonna add a new 3D object cube and called direction, and then I'm gonna attach it to the capsule by dragging it to the capsule, and it'll become a sub object, and then 0, 0, 0.
Wait. What?
Jack.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh,
Where do
no,
we
right
have
there.
this direction?
Right here. Yes.
Alright, and now I'm gonna scale down the cube,
How do we have the direction?
What? Oh shit! This.
and I'm gonna just stick it out the front of the capsule,
Plus go.
so you know which direction you're facing.
Yeah, but I think I scaled
But
enough.
how do you get it underneath?
Huh? Oh, to make it a sub object of another object, you grab it and drag it onto the object you want to child it to.
Gotcha.
And which side's the front?
The blue arrow.
The blue arrow's the front.
Yeah.
Alright, so now I try to run it.
Alright, now we run it and we see what happens. It should rotate with the camera. You can set it to rotate only when you begin moving, but that makes it more complicated. So now you will move forward with the camera and move side to side relative to the camera.
I also fucked something up.
How do you get the cube
I
inside
can't
that?
move backwards.
You can't move backwards?
Well, if I rotate my camera 180 degrees, I can't move
Alright.
forward, backwards.
Does your character not move with the camera?
It does.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't even need the cube. I don't know what the cube's for.
The cube is just to help you actually.
The cube is just to know which direction you're facing.
Oh.
Yeah. So now you can move in all directions, forward, backward, side to side, and it's actually forward, backward, side to side, and you can jump.
Go back to the
And now I will reopen the code.
You just put it so that you can self-assign.
start method. I feel like it's been
Okay, so I have something wrong with.
Also, it is 9 o'clock currently, so you're free to go. Well, you're always free to go, but you know what I mean.
No, you can
If
never.
you-
No, you can never leave.
If you like the code, we will post it to GitHub and we'll send it out with the video. So when we send that out, that will be available, and the video will be available later this week on YouTube.
Also,
Right.
everyone, if there's parts of this that you got down, but you don't really understand how they work and you want to, feel free to hop in the Discord or come to one of us sometime and just ask us, hey, I don't understand what this does and I want to know more, and we'll be happy to explain it to you.
You can just add us in the Discord. I'm Aaron, this is Phillips, and this is Jack.
Wait, where'd my box go?
So yeah, thank you for coming. Oh, also,
It's right there.
I'm gonna just skip through all those other things that we didn't get to, such as AI. If you'd like, please fill out this feedback form about our workshop so we know how to improve. This is also the Discord, and that's the website.